Mr. KO.
Hello, Brian.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. We didn't get to see each other last week because we were in the realm of virtual intersections, which I was both excited to present. It was Lee Kai-Fu and Stanley Chen doing AI 2041, but also sorry to miss the opportunity for real live interaction. So I'm glad to be back in the saddle here.
Absolutely. I like the ring of virtual intersections. It sounds like that could be our metaverse for when we explore new universes.
It's true. Well, also we have intersectionslive.com, which is our website with all of the many interviews. I mean, we've been doing this now for a year, and I think we're getting close to 100 interviews. I mean, believe it or not.
Wow.
So that is virtual intersections right there, because I would say 99% of them are as relevant today as they were when we first did the interview.
And I'm going to be revisiting every single episode here as we start to reimagine our content strategy. And let's see if it's not even 100% of all of the conversations that are still relevant today.
Right. There's always an outlier, but that's life.
There is always an outlier. Well, hey, let's just jump right in. I think this is a real exciting opportunity. I just want to welcome everybody to Intersections. I can't believe it's been a year. That's kind of taken me by surprise pleasantly. So we'll have to do a special year in the rearview mirror episode, perhaps.
Yeah, retrospective.
A retrospective, and maybe talk about some of our greatest hits, although they were all great hits. And but you, our audience, our community, this is why we do this show every single week. We bring amazing guests on to learn, to unlearn, to explore the art of the possible, with art being a key word here. The artistry of innovation, the artistry of creativity, and the artistry of technology is essentially this blending, this merging of things that we all need to embrace moving forward in this next normal, or whatever we want to call it. But we'd love to hear from you. So please share where you're tuning in from. Please share your questions and your comments. You make this show. You are part of this show. And with that, let me just jump right in and introduce my co-host and co-founder. If you're new to the show, his name is Mr. John Kao. The Economist has called him Mr. Creativity, and he's been a serial innovator. He's a thought leader, entrepreneur. He's got a column at Forbes, so make sure you read his column and follow him on social media. He's taught at Harvard Business School. He's served as visiting faculty at MIT Media Lab in Stanford. It's just an incredible background. It's just a gift to be able to spend this time with him and do this show and also spend time with you. He's also a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage. Wrote the best-selling book Jamming: The Art and Discipline of Business Creativity. He continues to advise on innovation for governments, massive companies, startups, and industry transformers. So, John, welcome to Intersections.
Brian, it's always a pleasure to be introduced by you, and I look forward to reciprocating, because your background is equally illustrious and diverse. So Brian's been involved with the digital domain since before digital was really a recognized feature on the landscape, and has made important intellectual and practical, more importantly, practical bridges to the worlds of social media and marketing and innovation and organizational transformation. Everything, resolves to digital in a way these days. So Brian's always been a pioneer, expressing his thought leadership in books, in presentations, in live stream shows like Intersections. And so it's remarkable that he even has a day job, which is Global Evangelist for Innovation at Salesforce. So there you go, Brian.
Thank you, John. And it's been an incredible week at Salesforce. It's been our Dreamforce, which is actually back live in a very special form this week. John, last time I saw you in person. No, that's not true. I saw you in person in March at your studio in San Francisco, and before that, it was at Dreamforce. I think that was 2019. Wow.
Right. Amber Restaurant.
Wow. Oh, excellent. Well, our first guest is backstage, so I'm going to do the honor of bringing him up here and introducing him. His name is Roger Casals. He's the founder and CEO, well, actually, of many companies. He's had 5 successful exits, and today we're here to talk about his new venture, Plaza. Welcome to Intersections, Roger. Oh, I have to bring him up. There we go.
Hi everyone. Brian, John, thank you for having me. A pleasure, an honor actually. So,
absolute pleasure to have you here. So, thank you. Let's just jump right in. So, Roger, we were introduced by some of the innovation work that I'm doing behind the scenes as part of the Special Skunk Works with my colleagues Aaron and Nat over at Salesforce, helping our customers reimagine the future of retail, marketplaces, and customer engagement and experiences. And you pop right up to the top of the list there of companies that are really helping to modernize the retail and customer experience. And so before we jump in, maybe you could spend a minute talking about your background and then also the new venture and the inspiration behind it.
Sure. My pleasure. I'm an entrepreneur. Well, first of all, I'm from Barcelona. Okay. This is important. I'm from Barcelona. I'm an entrepreneur. I've created several companies. I had so far 5 exits. Last 2 here in the Valley, one selling a company to Informatica and the other one selling a company, a cybersecurity company called Password Bank to Symantec, okay? Where I stayed there for shy of 3 years. And then I jumped to this new venture, Plaza.
Barcelona, or should I say Barcelona, is in my mother's homeland, and we spend a lot of time there, and also Madrid, where most of my family still lives. So, absolute pleasure. So, tell us about Plaza for those who aren't familiar with the company. Let's start there.
Well, Plaza basically is focusing on one new niche, a new sales channel. Okay, for e-commerces. So basically, long story short, what we aim to do is we are bringing personal commerce, or what Salesforce calls peer-to-peer commerce. Okay, basically, long story short, what we're talking about is, okay, e-commerce is great. Okay, e-commerce is great, but what about those recommendations, those purchases that you need a push, a nudge to be able to fulfill? You have doubts. You want to buy a camera. You want to buy a laptop. You want to buy some cosmetics because you don't know exactly which ones. We are bringing the same experience that you have in a store, basically online. So the way I like to frame it is we are humanizing interaction, but digitalizing the transaction. So everything happens online, but basically you are chatting, you are talking, you are discussing with an actual person, what I call carbon-based intelligence.
That's very clever. And before I go to the next question, I just want to remind everyone that you can bring your questions up. We're monitoring the comments. I'll put them on screen. We'll bring them to Roger as well. Also, let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to make sure that we are getting your voice heard in whatever country, state, city you're in. So, Roger, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is this idea that, kind of akin to the debate between vinyl and digital music, which is this idea of warmth, and that digital, well, theoretically lacks that warmth. And when we think about the digitization that's been happening and the accelerated digitization that's been happening because of the pandemic, I see that many retailers are losing that warmth of engagement, and that they're using digital to essentially facilitate and scale transactions. But what you're doing is bringing a human element into digital. And I would love to hear from you what you're seeing are some of the challenges that retailers have when approaching digital, and how you're helping them see the world in a new light.
Yeah, let me start with the end picture, which is, okay, what do we bring? What's the value that we bring? And the value that we bring is basically we double the engagement what we call the recurrence, how many times you come back to that very same online store, that e-commerce store, okay? And we basically double that with what we bring on the table. And the key element, the secret sauce, if I may, is basically the warmth, as you said. So that personal touch, that knowledge of that expert, of that person that knows you, knows the product, and that recommendation is a truthful, unique, honest, personalized, super personalized recommendation. So you buy the product in confidence, okay? So there's many stats. So for example, one of our customers has seen a tremendous increase in, it's L'Oreal, one of, joint customers with Salesforce, a tremendous increase in terms of loyalty, in terms of repetition. Customers come back for more. We increase the average order value. We increase how many times they buy afterwards, because they know that they can trust the person that made that recommendation, okay? So yeah, you're spot on. Warmth is what people is missing from that experience that they used to have in the store.
Trust takes on an entirely new meaning in this digital first world. In fact, trust is a couple of things. One, in a world where we can't trust all of the information that we see, especially online. And then two, at a time where trust wasn't something that was, I think, a pillar of every brand. It was just sort of, I think, taken for granted. And customers in the last year said, when they were asked, what's the one business transformation you want to see? The number one thing was trust, which is incredible. And if we look at Edelman's Trust Barometer, they publish that every year. The number one person that people trust is someone like them. And that's for better or for worse, especially if we're looking at vaccines and pandemic information. But they trust people like them. And so you're bringing together a platform, a marketplace for peers, I think, to help make decisions that are important, especially and I just got to say this, because I think for those marketers or for those content strategists or those customer experience strategists that might be watching, you don't talk the way your customers talk. You don't design the way your customers want to be engaged. We're just sort of taking these concepts from the 1990s and early 2000s and trying to modernize them and scale them. But when trust comes into play, for especially a digital first, scattered, multitasking brain, moving so quickly, that importance of information has to come from somewhere. And so, Roger, my last question before I turn it over to my colleague John here is, how can you convince retailers to start thinking more for that peer-to-peer level, that people-to-people form of engagement?
Honestly, COVID, the pandemic, helped us a lot, because they saw their stores shut down, okay? And one trend that we've seen for 5 years now is, those stars, the reviews, the product reviews are more and more less relevant, because, well, they don't talk about me, okay? I'm not saying that they are fake, that they are biased. They are basically not talking about my problem, what I need, my context, okay? So, yes, I think that brands are embracing these more and more. And now that we can bring these big stats, big, KPIs, amazing KPIs, that it's easier by the day, honestly, because many people is basically saying, so for example, Salesforce made a focus group, okay? And they analyzed, okay, in different batches, right? So millennials, Gen Zs, baby boomers. And they realized that in every single group, they wanted more personalization. So the next big thing is, okay, now I have the convenience of buying online, but now I want hyper personalization. They want to be talked directly, and that's still a human thing, fortunately.
Yeah, that's actually a really big thing, in that the idea of what a retail experience could be like now in a post-COVID world, where 61% of customers say that they're going to spend more time online after the pandemic than they did before the pandemic. That really blurs the line between what is a shopping experience and what is the role of a retailer, and then what is a marketplace and community? How does that play into things, especially decision making? So, I mean, talk about being at the right place at the right time. I'm excited for what you're going to do. And John, before I ask a million more questions, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you. The guest that we had on last week, Li Kai-fu, is one of the leaders in artificial intelligence research and policy. And he's come up with the term warm skills to differentiate what humans do best from what machines are going to be doing, which was captured really nicely in your quote earlier about humanizing interactions but digitizing transactions. And there's a lot to unpack there. But I guess my question has to do with what do you see as being the hallmarks of that human interaction and the experience of warmth? I'd like to understand a little bit more what the, just in a very mundane way. So what's the experience and who am I talking to? Am I talking to just somebody who's a peer who bought a camera that I'm interested in and who I may or may not, wind up liking, or kind of acknowledging their expertise? Is there a reputation component here? Are you staging interactions where you're getting essentially, kind of authorized intermediaries? And then just to load up the question a little bit more, as avatars become more lifelike and more interactive and more responsive, do they play a role in your humanizing interactions, or are you thinking that the warmth really has to come from a carbon-based life form, as our Star Trek friends would call it?
Yes. So carbon-based intelligence is where the warmth comes from. Okay. Let me give you a mundane example, as you were asking me. It happened to me. Every single time I go to my hairdresser, okay, he recommends me something for my hair, okay? And guess what? I always buy whatever, no questions asked. Whatever he proposed, I buy it, okay? The same with the personal trainer, okay? Those close folks, that people that you have around you, that you interact usually with, are those that you trust the most, okay? So there's a study that says that 90% of the conversations about a product ends up with a recommendation of buy it or not buy it, 90%. We always say, hey, read that book, see that movie, buy that iPhone, buy that laptop, that camera, whatever. We always like to show off about those. We trust that people. And that's exactly what Amazon has been cashing on. Okay, people go to Amazon to buy those things that they know what to buy. You don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to browse on Amazon to see what's new. No, you need a recommendation from someone that you follow, someone that told you so, etc. We're trying to bring that shopping experience where you can go to a store and say, hey, this is my problem. I need a cream because I have some, acne or something. What's best? And then that interaction from that expert that the brand is training is giving you that advice, okay? That is personalized to you. Another example, Kim Kardashian is a fabulous gal, okay? But if she recommends me to buy a Garmin watch, to me, it means nothing, because she doesn't know, and she's not talking to me, because you may be a marathonist or you can be just a casual, runner, okay? Which I am, which is the actual Garmin that I need. I need an expert. Who better than my personal trainer, okay? That's where the warmth and the intelligence come from, the context that those that know you or may end up knowing you come from, okay?
But who are these people in your expert network? Are they employed by the brands? Are they compensated in some way? Are they doing this just for the love of sharing their knowledge? And I mean, I assume that there will have to be some kind of a reputation server so
Yes.
that there's quality control, among other
Yes.
things.
So the first answer to you is, are they employees of the brand, or are they just freelancers that do this for the love of God or whatever? It's both. So we have two approaches. So we serve for certain brands like L'Oreal, for example. We help them to channel that expertise through some of their employees, but at the same time, they are inviting experts, for example, people that are beauty artists, beauty advisors in, Ulta, any of those small salons, okay, that they know their craft, they have their own customers, and they share their knowledge with their customers, with their clients. So first, the reputation and the trust comes because some of them know the customers, and then on the other side, we vet every single person that joins the platform. Okay, so you cannot join a Plaza without being vet whether or not you are a fitness trainer or you are an actual beauty advisor, a connoisseur, someone that knows their craft. We analyze who they are in terms of giving good advice. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I guess what you want to not have happen is people coming in and feeling like the advisor is recommending products that they have an economic interest in. I mean, you want some degree of objectivity, which gets a little tricky if they're employed by a brand.
Yeah, it's tricky, but first of all, most of our experts are freelancers, are people that basically recommend these to their own customers. And let me give you an example, because that was the fear that some VCs at the very beginning came to us and said, hey, Roger, how do I assure people that those are honest, truthful recommendations, right? Not because I'm recommending you the most expensive item in my catalog, okay? And we have data that shows that people meaning the experts, are recommending what they truly believe in, okay, in terms of product, etc. And I'm giving you a specific example. We have one of the brands that we sell in our platform is an amazing company called PowerPlate, okay, and they sell these expensive gym machines, okay, to help people to get in shape at home, which lately during the pandemic they got a big jump in sales, okay, and they have products that are worth that they are priced at $13,000, and they have some that are way less, ranging the $1,000 or $2,000. Okay, the amount of recommendations for the small ones compared to the big tickets are staggering. So 90% recommendations come from those smaller, more suitable and cheaper. So cheaper means a smaller commission. Okay, so one could think they will recommend the big ticket because they will make a ton of money. Okay, well, they don't. They go for the cheap one because it's the one that really fits the customer that they want to sell more things in the future for. Okay, that's the trick. If it's a one event, you may try to squeeze, milk the cow. But if you want to create that relationship, long-term relationship, you want to be truthful, and that's how it's working.
Well, I can definitely see the advantage here. I know recently when I'm shopping online, I get Amazon pop-ups for the same product, and I find it incredibly intrusive and annoying because it's digitizing trends. It just makes me feel like I'm a transaction machine as opposed to a human. Well, let me just shift gears because I had one other question I wanted to ask you in our remaining time, which is, you've started a bunch of companies, and this is, I guess, number 6, or maybe there are others that we haven't heard about. Anyway, there are quite a few. What do you know now that you didn't know when you were starting out about what makes for success. What do you know now about how to do it that you didn't know when you were starting out?
That's a question that my investors will hate me for saying this. I have no idea. So every single time that I create a company, so I give advice to many advisors, and the only advice that I give them is, please don't follow any advice that I give you, okay? Because what do I know? And
Clearly, you're not a consultant.
no, not only because of that, it's because some of the learnings that I had in the past are not applicable today. And probably what I'm learning today that are applicable to Plaza, or I think that are applicable to Plaza, they will not be applicable to something else, So the usual suspects, right? And honestly, I've always worked the same way. I always had the same work ethic, and I tried the same hard. But I think that luck, being at the right time, at the right place, is of utmost importance, because you need to be lucky. You need to be at the right time, do the things the right way.
Well, there are those that say that luck, to be lucky requires effort, right?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Not, it's not like it just drops on your head. You and Lady Luck collaborate to create the conditions that we would define as being lucky, and that's probably worth 30 minutes in the future unto itself. So mindful of the time, I'm going to throw back to Brian to bring it to a close.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Roger, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I love the idea of connecting people with people around decision making, and that brings that warmth that I think we're often missing in digital. And the last thing that I would say too is for those retailers or those brands thinking about essentially what's a marketplace for trustworthy advice to make informed decisions. It's this idea that I have to imagine that the upsides, if you have to document the ROI, are going to be increased conversions and decreased returns because people will be making purchases with more confidence. So, Roger, I look forward to working with you on our projects at Salesforce, and thank you so much for being on Intersections.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys. Looking forward to working with you guys.
Good luck. Good luck.
Good luck.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right, John. So our next guest is already backstage, and I think you should do the honors on this next introduction.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Brant Cooper, who is a man of many parts, but let's at least enumerate some of them. He's a best-selling author of a book called The Lean Entrepreneur, which I assume is a follow-on to Lean Startup and other concepts of lean. He's founder of a company called Move the Needle, which is engaged in transformational thinking and I hope action taking as well around this kind of paradigm shift that we're involved with. He's an advisor to startups, to large enterprises, and he describes himself as involved in changing industrial age mindsets into digital age opportunities and reimagining 21st century organizations. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm particularly interested in kicking this off because Brant, you may or may not know that I was a faculty member at Harvard Business School for 14 years, back in the Stone Ages when we had to have an entrepreneurship interest group to kind of figure out how to define entrepreneurship and how to teach it. Because I remember I was a member of the class of 1982 at Harvard Business School. I got an MBA from there, I confess. And the only entrepreneurship curriculum there was called Starting Small Business. And it was kind of like this sideshow, a tiny little sideshow. And now, the paradigm has shifted and, it's the whole curriculum is focused on what they call entrepreneurial management. So, I'd love to hear a little bit about your framework. I mean, how you look at this current era that we're in, what you think the biggest gaps are in terms of this moving the needle agenda that you set for yourself, and how entrepreneurship has changed. Because, lean entrepreneur suggests that you've kind of taken it out of the traditional model and migrated into someplace new. So why don't we start there and see where we wind up?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me and for that introduction, John, Brian. So, boy, yeah, big question. I mean, I think that back in the day that you're talking about, there was no difference between a startup and a small business. And so entrepreneurship really referred to sort of the small businesses that didn't necessarily want to scale. And I think, I lived through the dot-com boom and bust up in the San Francisco Bay Area and worked in a number of startups. And that was actually my first encounter with this idea that there were startups that were hoping to go big. They wanted to scale and become these big enterprises. And so I think that, I don't know where it is exactly today, except that I think that people that talk about Silicon Valley style startups, we mean startups differently than what a lot of entrepreneurial organizations still refer to as startups, usually hyphenated, right? Start hyphen up, which means small business. And of course, those things get funding differently. Their desired outcomes are different. Even their mindset is different. And so, again, I lived through the dot-com boom and bust. I ended up actually writing the first book that talked about lean startup and customer development and product market fit and all of that stuff. Eric Ries's book obviously just opened that door to not only the world, but also to large corporations. And I think that that's when I at least tried to adopt the term entrepreneurial spirit to mean, how do we deal with uncertainty? And if it's massive amounts of uncertainty, how do we formulate businesses around overcoming that uncertainty with the hope of getting big? And the hope of getting big really is, I'm trying to create value for lots of people, right? And so I think that the term lean is very purposeful because it goes back to lean manufacturing concepts, which was the Toyota production system, how cars were being manufactured in Japan in the 50s. And to them, it was about reducing waste in the production of value. And I think that in my estimation, we've sort of lost a lot of that value part, especially here in the West. And we concentrate on execution and scaling and efficiency. But if we don't keep in mind that this is in service to creating value in the world, then we're losing something big. And I think that some of the inequities that we see in the economy and in the world are driven by this execution, financial efficiency mindset that really marked the industrial age. And so to bring it all the way forward, this new digital age that we're in, I don't think that those old management practices work anymore. We have to learn how to compete based upon creating value again. And I think that we'll start seeing some of those inequities turn just by that simple fact.
And how does that translate into teachable, learnable proficiencies that, let's say, someone early in their career or a retooled corporate executive who's read some book on intrapreneurship back in the 80s or whatever? I mean, what is your body of knowledge and moving the needle offer in terms of teachable, learnable proficiencies? Because I think everyone would agree that we're in a different age from the industrial era, and we need to focus on value creation, not just on efficiency for its own sake. But how do you actually get that? And how do you actually drive that into the mindset of individual entrepreneurs and individual leaders?
Right. So I describe them as being the 5 E's, the 5 elements of having this mindset. And the first is empathy. And so that's understanding our customers deeply. It's understanding their needs and their desires and their aspirations. It's not, I'm an old product manager. It's not going to customers and asking them what they want and then doing what they say. It's understanding why they're saying what they're saying and understand them in a deeper way. And it's also applying empathy internally to a company. So applying it to people on your team, applying it to colleagues, even applying it to leadership. The second E is this idea of exploration. So that's admitting what we don't know. And this, again, often requires new skills, being able to not be an expert on anything. Your previous guest actually mentioned this. Don't listen to my own advice. And so that's powerful. It's actually admitting what you don't know and then going out and seeking how to learn, how to figure those things out. We're born as learning machines. Is that cropped up on the picture there. We are learning machines. We're born, without the ability to walk or talk. And it's that childlike creativity and exploration in the world that will help us overcome that uncertainty. The third E is evidence. So it doesn't mean let data decide for us, but it's us using insights and data in order to help us inform decisions, cut through our own biases. The fourth E is equilibrium, and this is a balance of execution and exploration. So there's what I consider a mythology in the innovation industry that 95 or 99% of your business should be focused on execution. And then there's this little innovation silo, and they get to do all of the fun exploration work. But the fact of the matter is that we all face uncertainty even in our daily lives. And so we have to have a balance of being able to use this self-awareness and this exploration in order to overcome the uncertainty. Businesses did not just simply execute their way through COVID. Their fundamental businesses were upended, and they had to use the exploration principles in order to learn how to go forward. And the fifth E, and I think this is especially important in the digital age, is ethics. And we have to bring our core values into our daily work. And so we actually have to purposefully implement guardrails and into our mission statements, ways to ensure that we are respecting our customers. It's not only about data privacy, but of course it includes that, but it's also to ensure that what we're doing is consistent with our corporate as well as our own personal values. And so I think those 5 elements are things that people could apply tomorrow, today. It's a bigger challenge, obviously, bringing that mindset into larger corporations. But you see a receptiveness to it. And the trick really is how do you get it going? I think that a lot of the big companies go and hire the big consulting firms, and they try to do this massive top-down implementation of being more agile. And that doesn't work. It really is a grassroots, bottom level up behavior change. And so you need the leadership to say, yes, we're going to do it, but you have to start with behaviors really from the ground floor.
But how does that happen? I mean, it's like saying to somebody, well, we have creativity as a value, so be more creative. I mean, nothing's going to happen. So, now you're saying we should be more empathetic. Telling somebody to be more empathetic doesn't necessarily get more empathy.
That's right.
Just like, telling someone to be more opportunity seeking doesn't generate more opportunity. So again, tell us a little bit about the how. How are we going to get all this good stuff?
Yeah, so I think that the optimistic part of it is that every big company actually already has all of these people in their company. Not necessarily at scale yet, but you have human-centered design professionals, you have people that do agile, you have entrepreneurial-minded people. And so the trick is to empower them to go and take time and go develop this empathy. And so the type of things that we've seen done, and some examples in the book are running internal impackathons. So rather than hackathons, which are 2 days of just trying to string a product together, you actually take a couple of days and go develop empathy for stakeholders or customers, and run experiments to try to figure out whether your ideas have any chance of working. And then using evidence and pitching out your evidence to leadership to see if then you can get those initiatives funding. I counsel that companies should be doing this based upon near impact challenges, right? So some of that uncertainty that exists in the core business, the design for group is not working well with the manufacturing group, as an example, or it could be updating sales scripts, or it could be testing a new marketing plan, or it could be just using these type of principles to test new features or reassembling a product differently. There's just an infinite number of challenges that can be taken on in a couple of days, and start generating evidence to see if the ideas will actually drive the change. And so if you can get that work done, provide the time and the space for people to spend their energy that way, that drives some amount of near-term impact, then leaders get, wow, we actually do have the ability to do that. And wow, that actually can improve productivity and efficiency. It's not taking time away from our execution mode. And there are a number of companies that have implemented those type of processes. Perhaps the biggest, most well-known would be Intuit, which, within 100 days had 100 different internal teams working on different initiatives and drove, within those 100 days, $10 million worth of savings. And over the years, that was up to 100 million just by sort of this internal skunk works, providing the time and space for people to generate evidence for ideas, not just an idea competition, but actually going out and doing the work.
How has the digital domain complicated or enriched or changed the tasks of the entrepreneur, in your view?
Well, so in a lot of ways, I think it's easier to run experiments with all of the digital, even in this day and age with COVID and everybody on remote calls. Having remote calls with customers or prospective customers is easier than it was before. I think from a negative point of view, it just means there's more people behind a keyboard, and a lot of people are reluctant to leave their keyboard and actually go and interact with other human beings, with customers or prospective customers. And so there's positive and negative to it. But one of the trickiest parts of operating in this way is what data are you looking at? And one of the biggest triumphs of the digital age is that you can measure the behavior of your stakeholders or your customers to determine whether they're engaged or not, right? So any new product or service is trying to change people's behavior. They're doing something now, and you're actually giving them a way, you hope, that they will change the way they're interacting with you. And so the digital allows you to measure your progress towards the impact that you're trying to have. And I think it's one of the toughest things for enterprises to do is to focus on the right data. Startups do it more naturally. Investors know that they're not going to get their desired outcomes for 5 or 10 years down the road. So they actually know how to measure the progress towards that impact. Whereas companies typically are measuring how many tasks somebody performs over time. But again, the digital era allows us to track engagement, satisfaction, our funnels in a far superior way that allows us to take action based upon what will move the needle.
Well, thank you for all that. I'm going to, I think, throw over to Brian now. And I also will note, and you probably, if you're viewing this show, you can't help noticing that Brant has a book that's coming out shortly, Disruption Proof: Empower People, Create Value, and Drive Change. So we recommend that to your attention. So over to you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. That's it's a good segue because I'm actually bringing it up on a different site as well because they're having a hard time reading this on the screen. So, hey, Brant, well, thanks for coming on and congratulations on the new book. I do want to address a couple of comments too. So for those who are watching, please share your questions. Also share where you're tuning in from. So Hugo brings up something really interesting here. At Salesforce, we had found it's actually research I brought up with our previous guest, Roger. The number one thing that customers wanted to see from business transformation was becoming trustworthy. The number two thing was transforming their role that they play in society and becoming more sustainable because everybody, a lot of people, not just politicians, politicians aside, believe that the world is changing and that we have to have a positive impact on it. And I loved your idea of impactathons. So do you see an opportunity here in your work for a 60, which would stand for environment?
Well, so it's funny. The E is a great letter because I think that there could easily be 25 E's. So I'm all for sustainability. I guess, not everybody is going to be like you, Brian, and like Mark Benioff and actually come to the table with this idea that there's value on those type of issues that the corporations should bring. I guess I think that I don't think that we're going to be able to convince all of the CEOs of the world and the C-suites of the world that they need to start contributing. I think that there's a system. We need to look at things in a more systemic fashion. And so to me, for example, we should require sustainability metrics to be shared just in the same way that we require financial metrics to be shared. We should require, if you're going to be listing on a stock exchange, to share your sustainability metrics. And so to me, that's a market-based approach to getting people to take sustainability more seriously. And so I think that in this day and age, things like sustainability and diversity are good business. But I also think that having a means for shareholders as well as for customers to be able to evaluate companies based upon their company's level of sustainability and their actual commitment to social norms, I think would be valuable. I think also that so I'm not sure I want to add another E, but I am sympathetic to the environment, and I do think that we need a means for consumers and shareholders to actually pressure companies to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Benioff talks about that as businesses becoming a platform for change. And the next question from a guest we have here is from Cameron. And this is interesting that he brought this up because I just presented on this to the National Association of Corporate Directors, which was saying that they many folks on boards are actually part of the problem. And that is because their primary focus is to help increase shareholder returns. And as such, not that that's a bad thing, it's just as such, you tend to psychologically fall into this idea of cost control and things like innovation, disruption proofing, transformation. These are things that innovation. These are things that become cost centers. And would love to hear from you how you feel that your work in disruption proof is going to help boards and the C-suite understand that there are other stakeholders out there, and that long-term success is as or sometimes more important than quarter-to-quarter performance.
Yeah, it was one of those things that it's always driven me crazy about this idea of increasing shareholder value, is that if you don't attach a time frame to it, it doesn't really make any sense, right? So what you could do to maximize the value this week is way different than what you would do to maximize the value for a quarter or for a year or for 5 years or for the lifetime. And so I think that these ideas of increasing the transparency, again, the sustainability numbers, you can use the B Corp has an assessment. The nonprofit that does the B Corps has an assessment that companies could use to make to share out what their sustainability is. The NASDAQ themselves actually requires now, or they at least submitted to the SEC, that diversity, transparency be shared for all companies that are listed there. I think that one of the things that is going to happen is that the nature of the digital world, the increased complexity and the uncertainty that we face, is going to require companies to look beyond simply this financial efficiency. So COVID to me is a great example. If supply chains were completely disrupted. So if you back in the day pre-COVID had decided not to build redundant supply chains or not have manufacturing capability domestically, then COVID completely rocked your world because you couldn't get your supply chain going again. Those type of disruptions, I think, are going to be commonplace. I think that's once we get through COVID, that's not the last of it. We can look at, the ship getting stuck in a canal disrupted supply chains, energy grid collapse in Texas. I was going through healthcare treatment here when ransomware took down a healthcare system. And so treatments themselves were stopped for weeks. These type of disruptions, I think, are going to be commonplace. And so the idea that we're only going to make financial decisions or use financials to make decisions on things like redundancy and failover and backup plans, and that those are going to be putting the company at near-term risk, let alone the far-term risk. And so it's really why I sort of led off with this idea that we need to get focused on creating value again. So if we measured efficiency based upon our ability to create value in the world, that's moving the goalpost a couple of steps away from just the financial efficiency, then we're actually optimizing the right thing. The financial efficiency is an assembly line mentality, right? It's how much output can we get from input. But in today's day and age, you can output all of the product that you want, but if nobody wants your product, your company is going to fail. And so what we need to do is measure the efficiency on providing value to our customers. And if we look at it in that way, things like redundancy and building disruption-proof organizations becomes a financial necessity.
You know, that last part is just spot on. In fact, in a lot of my conversations with executives, I try to help them understand the differences between the investments that they're making in iteration versus innovation, because a lot of times they get confused, especially when we start looking at new advanced technologies like AI and automation. And really, at the end of the day, innovation is about creating new value, and value is in the eye of the beholder, and that eye of the beholder is the customer or the stakeholder. And so I talk about this as the undercover boss moment, when that the show has the same ending every single time, but it is that moment of empathy when a decision maker or a leader has to see the world through the lens of an employee or a customer, and suddenly they can't unsee it. And this is really, I think, the job of Brant, you, John, myself, and helping executives see a world differently through the lens of those that that really matter to their business, and to use, I think, digital in a way of not only disruption proofing, but as a way to become more empathetic and more meaningful in a time when, as you put it, disruption is infinite, and we don't know what that next disruption is going to be. So you have to build a business model based on the 5 E's, perhaps, that helps your business compete for the next disruption and the next opportunities that disruption creates. I think historically we've seen that businesses perform, well, the best businesses invent, and those that are not the best businesses, just to put it politely, tend to regress or stagnate. Because they take a much more risk-averse approach, batten down the hatches and let's see if we can survive this disruption. So, Brant, with the few minutes that we have left, I'd love for you to just share some advice. Of course, we'll recommend that everybody takes a look at the book Disruption Proof. But what advice do you have for those executives watching right now, and some steps that they can take differently getting back to their office tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think that in the end, what we're going to build are companies that decentralize decision making. So when change occurs, when disruption occurs, when the whims of our customers change, those things happen on the edge of our companies, on the edge of the economy. So where those changes are happening is where the decisions need to be made. And so we have a long road here, I think, to build the trust that enables us to empower people, but we hire smart people. And so we need to empower them to solve problems. Again, back in the the middle of the industrial age, if you were producing a microwave oven, your primary efficiency was, can I create it less expensive enough that the middle class can buy it? The middle class did not get to choose all of the different options they wanted. They didn't get to choose all of the colors or the buttons or whatever. It was so life-changing that they were just going to buy it. But that's not the case right now. Everybody's running around with computers in their pockets. They can change vendors from one day to the other. And so there's so much decentralized activity going on, decisions made on the edge. We have to build systems where we're empowering our people to make decisions where they run into the issues. And so that's a distributed, agile type of team. And I think that leaders today, tomorrow, can start working on that. A lot of leaders have gone through, new skills development, empathy and vulnerability, empowerment, books like Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. So I think a lot of these executives are getting these new skills. They don't necessarily know how to apply them. And the best way to apply it is build some exploration work into your execution plans. Run some experiments. Have a day where you go talk to customers. Try to think of some, what is keeping you up at night? Can I empower a team to go and try to solve that issue for me? And demonstrate that you actually have the people that can work in this way, and that it creates human beings, workers that want to come to work. They feel empowered. They feel like they're making a contribution, and they're happier. And all of the studies have shown that those make more productive employees. And so I think it's a win-win. And I just think that, we have to go for it.
Yeah. Well said. I think that's for leaders to assume that reskilling and upskilling and learning and unlearning don't apply to them in this new normal is part of an equation I refer to ignorance plus arrogance equals irrelevance. So I think this is the time for all of us to grow. Brant, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with Disruption Proof, and we hope to have you on the show again.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Brant.
All right. Well, that's another episode of Intersections, and just fascinating at how much things are evolving, how many new ideas are out there, how many new opportunities are there, and I think the natural human response is to find every reason why we can't do something new, to try to return back to our comfort zones. But I think if it's one thing that we're hearing today, and pretty much in every episode, is that there has to be comfort in being uncomfortable and growing and learning.
Well, the other thing we note is that there was a real kind of congruence between Roger's very clinical vantage point of, being in the trenches and being a serial entrepreneur, and Brant's pattern recognition of many phenomena and kind of grouping them into a new framework. And, what impresses me as a through line in both is the notion of the human element, whether we call it warm skills or interactivity or, the new managerial proficiencies that I believe are still quite a bit of a promissory note. I mean, we're having trouble figuring out how to teach this stuff in schools. It's exponentially harder to teach it to, adults who already think they know everything and are, in social systems that in a way preclude certain kinds of vulnerability and learning from taking place. So, this whole notion of how to cultivate the new intelligences, so to speak, and to actually do it, the how, to me is the $64 question that we all have to kind of address.
Yes, indeed. And for all of those folks watching right now, thank you for tuning in each and every week. We catalog every single episode, and they're all relevant. They're all worth your time at intersectionslive.com. Please take a look at our Substack and subscribe when you have a moment. And we will see you next Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific. And Gregarious, if you're there, I think we're going to need you to take us out. Otherwise, I'll have to find that tab.